Earth. On February 28th in the year 1861, Congress created the Colorado Territory. With the region's white population booming because of the Pikes Peak Gold Rush, Congress created the new territory of Colorado. When the U.S. acquired it after the Mexican War ended in 1848, the land that would one day become Colorado was nearly unpopulated by Anglo settlers. Ute, Arpaio, Cheyenne, and other Native Americans had occupied the land for centuries, but the Europeans who had made sporadic appearances there since the 17th century never stayed for long. It was not until 1851 that the first permanent non-indigenous settlement was established in the St. Louis Valley. As with many other western regions, the lure of gold launched the first major Anglo invasion. In July of 1858, the band of prospectors working steam beds near modern-day Denver found tiny flecks of gold in their pans. Since the gold-bearing streams were located in the foothills not far from the massive mountain named for the explorer Zebulon Pike, the subsequent influx of hopeful miners was termed the Pikes Peak Gold Rush. By the spring of 1859, an estimated 50,000 gold seekers had reached this latest of a long series of American El Dorados. As the first gold-bearing streams to be discovered played out, prospectors moved westward into the rugged slopes of the Rocky Mountains in search of new finds. Wherever sizable deposits were discovered, ramshackle mining camps like Central City, Nevadaville, and Black Hawk appeared, sometimes almost overnight. Meanwhile, out on the flat plains at the edge of the mountains, Denver became the central supply town for the miners. Although few miners came to Colorado planning to stay long, they were eager to protect their property rights in gold dust. Far from the seats of Eastern government, the miners and townspeople cobbled together their own simple governments, usually revolving around a miners' court that regulated claims. Technically lacking in any genuine legal foundation, the miners' court did maintain the minimal order needed for the mineral exploitation of the territory to continue. The unreliable mining operation soon gave way to larger, highly capitalized, and relatively permanent load mining operations. The pioneers recognized that the vast mineral resources of the Rockies could form the foundation of a thriving new state, but the people settling there needed a more formal system of laws and government. The congressional designation of new western states and territories had been bogged down for several years as southern and northern politicians fought over whether slavery would be permitted in the new western regions. By 1861, the South had seceded, clearing the way for the northern politicians to begin creating free labor states. It was February 28th in the year 1953 at Cambridge University that scientists James D. Watson and Francis H.C. Crick announced that they had determined the double helix structure of DNA, the molecule containing human genes. The molecular biologists were aided significantly by the work of another DNA researcher, Rosalind Franklin, although she is not included in the announcement, nor did she share the subsequent Nobel Prize award for it. Though DNA, short for deoxyribonucleic acid, was discovered in 1869, its crucial role in determining genetic inheritance wasn't demonstrated until 1943. In the early 1950s, Watson and Crick were only two of many scientists working on figuring out the structure of DNA. California chemist Linus Pauling suggested an incorrect model at the beginning of 1953, prompting Watson and Crick to try and beat Pauling at his own game. On the morning of February 28th, they determined that the structure of DNA was a double helix polymer, or a spiral of two DNA strands, each containing a long chain of monomer nucleotides wound around each other. According to their findings, DNA replicated itself by separating into individual strands, each of which became the template for a new double helix. In his best-selling book, The Double Helix, in 1968, Watson later claimed that Crick announced the discovery by walking into the nearby Eagle Pub and blurting out that, quote, "we had found the secret of life," unquote. The truth wasn't that far off, as Watson and Crick had solved a fundamental mystery of science: how it was possible for genetic instructions to be held inside organisms and passed from generation to generation. Watson and Crick's solution was formally announced on April 25th in 1953, following its publication in the month's issue of Nature magazine. The article revolutionized the study of biology and medicine. Among the developments that followed directly from it were prenatal screening for disease genes, genetically engineered foods, the ability to identify human remains, the rational design of treatments for disease such as AIDS, and the accurate testing of physical evidence in order to convict or exonerate criminals. Crick and Watson later had a falling out over Watson's book, which Crick felt misrepresented their collaboration and betrayed their friendship. A much larger controversy arose over the use Watson and Crick made of work done by another DNA researcher, Rosalind Franklin. Colleague Maurice Wilkins showed Watson and Crick Rosalind Franklin's X-ray photographic work previous to their famous discovery. The imagery established that the DNA molecule existed in a helical conformation. When Crick and Watson won the Nobel Prize in 1962, they shared it with Wilkins. Franklin, who continued her eternity in 1958 of ovarian cancer and was thus ineligible for the award, never learned of the role her photos played in historic scientific breakthrough. It was February 28th in the year 1994 that the first NATO military action was taken. In the first military action in the 45-year history of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, U.S. fighter planes shot down 4 Serbian warplanes engaged in a bombing mission in violation of Bosnia's no-fly zone. The U.S., 10 European countries, and Canada founded NATO in 1949 as a safeguard against Soviet aggression. With the end of the Cold War, NATO members approved of the use of its military forces for peacekeeping missions in the countries outside the alliance, and in 1994 agreed to enforce UN resolutions enacted to bring about an end to the bloody conflict in the former Yugoslavia. In 1994 and 1995, NATO planes enforced the no-fly zone over Bosnia-Herzegovina and struck at Bosnian Serb military positions and airfields on a number of occasions. On December 20th, 1995, NATO began the mass deployment of 60,000 troops to enforce the Dayton Peace Accords, signed in Paris by the leaders of the former Yugoslavia on December 14th. The NATO troops took over from a UN peacekeeping force that had failed to end the fighting since its deployment in early 1992, although UN troops had proved crucial in the distribution of humanitarian aid to the impoverished population of Bosnia. The NATO force, with its U.S. support and focused aim of enforcing the Dayton Agreement, proved more successful in maintaining the peace in the war-torn region. The information documented on this audio file can be verified on history.com.